And we are back with Illustrator Creative Cloud 2014 release, Chapter 12 in the Classroom in a Book series. And we are working with perspective and the perspective grid. First thing I want to mention is that although the book says that this lesson is going to take approximately 60 minutes to complete, I anticipate this is going to take much longer for many of you. Some of you will breeze through this. I do expect that you're going to run into some difficulty using the grid planes. The other thing we're going to deal with is bringing symbols in and doing some symbol editing while they're in perspective. This is not going to be the easiest chapter. It is, however, going to be the last chapter that we're doing out of the book. You will have a project that will be due after this, and then we will say goodbye to Illustrator and we will be working with Photoshop. So for those of you who are into getting photo readjustment experience, that's going to be an exciting change for you. We are now going to open up and start working with the chapter. Again, make sure that if you want to go up to resetting your essentials so that everything works, you may find this very necessary for this chapter, even if you had not before. We will be using a color apparently out of the library, but you can close that down. This is the file we're going to start with, and we're going to be working up to building this. So you can see all of this is going to be laid on, and everything is going to actually look like it is three-dimensional rather than being a single flat surface. So with that for reference, we're going to get started. Make sure that you do a save as, makeup add. If I could type, I'd be fine. By the way, I may have some issues with creating everything. My mouse has broken, and I am having to use this as a one-button mouse, which is not exactly prime for using Illustrator. So until I can get out and buy myself a new mouse, I may have some issues with trying to get through everything. So please bear with me and understand that I am suffering from equipment failure until I can get a hold of another mouse. In Illustrator, you have the Perspective Grid tool as well as the Perspective Grid Selection tool. So here is your Perspective Grid tool, which brings this element up, and you have your Perspective Selection tool. If you click your Layers panel, you're going to be working on the perspective layer. Then you can collapse this, but do make sure you are on that center layer. The other two are locked, thankfully. So that's going to make life a little bit easier. We are working with the 2-point perspective grid, which is a non-printing grid, and this appears on the artboard. You can use it to draw, and the content can be snapped to it. It's a 2-point grid, which are composed of several planes of surface. It is 2-point because on your horizon line you have 2 points where everything disappears into infinity. This shows you the default perspective grid. We have the right side, which is coming up in orange, the left side in blue. We also have the ground, which comes up in green. Now, anything that appears below the horizon line, which is the line that's going through the center, is going to have, you're going to be able to see the top of it. Anything that extends up above, if you are using the baseline and extend this up above, you will have you will not see the top of it, and you won't have to deal with anything to cover it. You should be able to adjust your horizon line and adjust your baseline so that you can change where your vanishing point is. Make sure you have read over everything on the illustration on page 361 that describes what everything is. Particularly note over here your plane switching widget. That's going to be very important as we move from one section to another. To begin the lesson, you're going to work with the perspective grid starting with an Illustrator preset. The perspective grid is set up in 2-point perspective. We're going to go to View, And we're going to go to Perspective Grid. And on this, we are going to do a 3-point perspective, 3-point normal view. And notice right now that our grid changes to a 3-point perspective. You can go back in Perspective Grid and go back to 2-point normal view. You can adjust the grid using the Perspective Grid tool or using the View Perspective Grid Define Grid, which would be View Perspective Grid Define Grid. You can make changes to the grid if you already have content on it. It would be easier for you to establish your grid first before you add content. So in this section, we're going to make some adjustments to our grid. We're going to move the grid so that it's positioned correctly to draw some boxes. We're also going to draw content in the default grid position, and then we'll move that content later on. So right now you do want to make sure that your smart guides are turned on. With the Perspective Grid tool, which is this one, make sure you have the right one, you are going to position the pointer over the left ground level point, which this is ground level. We're going to select and click on this. And when the pointer changes, so you're going to get cross points instead of the box. When this changes, drag it to the left and up, which is going to move the entire perspective grid. You want to have the position similar to what you're looking at in your book, which is going to pull up and over. It's going to look something like this. It does not have to exactly match. We'll move things around a little bit. I've gone a little too far. I want to pull mine back just a little bit so that the edge is still on the artboard. The left and right ground point levels allow you to drag the perspective grid to different sections of the artboard or even onto a completely different artboard. We're going to change the height of the grid using your Perspective Grid tool. You're going to position the pointer over the vertical grid extent point. So notice as you do, the pointer is going to change to something that looks like a little, like 4 little boxes stacked. And you're going to drag it down part way. So we're going to get a slightly smaller level than what we had. Anywhere in there, just so that it's a little bit shorter, is going to come out pretty doggone close. So just pull this down. Dragging the vertical extent down is a way to minimize the grid if you're drawing objects that are less precise, and we'll discover more about that later in the lesson. Position the pointer over the right end of the horizon line, so that's this one, and you'll get an up-down vertical arrow. If you click and drag up a little bit until you see approximately 270 points right around in here, so we have changed the angle that we're looking at. The closer you're zoomed into the grid, the finer the increments are that you can adjust. So if you zoom in, you'll be able to see that a little bit better. You'll be able to make finer adjustments. Now we're going to adjust the planes so that you can draw a product box that shows one side a little bit more than the other one. So we're going to have to move our vanishing point. Zoom out a couple of times. That's your command or control key and your minus key. You'll zoom out a bit and choose View, go to Perspective Grid, and Lock Station Point. This locks the right and left vanishing points so that they are going to move together. Now with the Perspective Grid tool again, you're going to position the pointer over the right vanishing point, which is this one, and when you get a horizontal arrow, one going side to side, you're going to drag it to the right until the measurement label gives you an X value or a width of about 15 inches. So right now I am at 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and there is right around 15 inches. So you can see now how everything is shifted. This changes both planes on the grid, and the product box we create is going to have a more visible right face than the left face. Setting up the grid to do your drawing in the first place, it's an important step in creating the artwork to get the perspective that you desire. The next thing we're going to do is to access some of the perspective grid options that we've already adjusted and continue on using the Define Perspective Grid dialog box. You're going to choose View, Fit Artboard in Window, go to View, Perspective Grid, Define Grid, which is going to give us our dialog box. Our unit should not be in points. We are going to move to inches. We want a grid line to be every third of an inch, so every 0.3 of an inch. Changing the grid line every option adjusts the grid cell size. It can help you be more precise when drawing and editing. Content will snap to the lines of the grid by default. Notice that you can also change the scale of the grid. You may want to do if you're using real world measurements. So, if you're doing something that's maybe going to be in feet, you might want to adjust that so that your scale is like 1 inch to equals 1 foot or something like that. When you're finished making those changes, everything else should be at the default. Go ahead and click OK. The grid will change slightly in appearance. Now, it may not look exactly like it is in the book. It may look a little bit different. So at this point, in fact, to keep us from doing anything else with it, we're going to go to View, Perspective Guides again, and we are going to lock the grid. Now it can't be moved. This restricts the grid movement, other grid editing features of the Perspective Grid tool. Now you can only change the visibility and the grid plane position, and we're going to work with those later. So at this point, File, Save, and we'll continue on page 365 in the next section.